Good morning. It's Today is the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Sivan. It is also the 8th day of the regular month of June, and we are here. June is here as well, and we are here to study the book, The Four Worlds. We have completed the introduction in the previous weeks, and now we are about to start the actual letter, which is a response to a person who wants to find out what are the four worlds and how are they separated between one another when spirituality, one thing doesn't take up the space of another thing. In other words, anything can be together at the same place at the same time. And what are the functions of these four worlds and how do they function? And so we learned a little bit about the names of the four worlds and where they are placed and what they represent, and now we're going to get into the meat and to the heart of the matter. By the grace of God, 15th of Mar Cheshvan, 5698, or that would be 1938, Otwocz in Poland. Otwocz is a little suburb right outside of Warsaw. Got to travel a little distance on the highway to get to Otwocz. It has lots of greenery. It's a very beautiful resort type of area. And the previous Rebbe, who had been suffering just terribly in the early 30s, he had left Russia in 1927, right after Simchas Torah. He was basically pushed out of Russia because he had been arrested 2 months previously for his activity, which they considered counter-revolutionary against the Soviets. His activity was to build shuls, to build Jewish schools, to build mikvahs, to basically continue practice of Judaism. And this was the Jewish section of the communists called the Yevsekskia, the section of Yevrei, or Jews, who pursued Judaism, and they ended up, each and every single last one of this Yevseksia was themselves arrested and murdered by Stalin, or he did away with them when he felt that the people were not as strong communists as they should be. The Jews jump first on everything, and they're the ones who would start with all this revolution. Everybody should be equal. The only ones who are not equal are people who don't behave like them, you see. Everybody's accepted, except when you start behaving a little differently, then you're not accepted all of a sudden. So the Jews were the ones who walked into the previous Rebbe's apartment, arrested him. People who were descendants, either their father or grandfather were descendants of Hasidim, of Chabad Hasidim, came in to arrest him in a very low fashion. In fact, one of them said, Rebbe, on the way out, let me take your bag. My grandfather traveled to you all the way to Lubavitch, to your grandfather. And he said, your grandfather was worthwhile carrying my bags. You are a piece of nothing. And he defied them totally. He was standing there, and they said, he wanted to daven. They said, what room do you think we're in right now? He says, I think we're in a room that does not need a mezuzah. The room in the house that doesn't need a mezuzah is a room where you take care of your bodily needs. And he was completely defiant, refused to speak with them in Russian, although he was fluent in Russian, spoke to them only in Yiddish. They all were Jews, so they all spoke Yiddish, and they all understood what he was saying. Anyway, they sentenced him to death. But because he made a wrong turn, can you believe this? He went into the building, and for some reason they didn't quite take him all the way in to the place where they were supposed to take him. And he went and made a left turn, and he walked down a hall, and he sat down on a bench. Somebody walked down and says, what are you doing here? He says, I don't know, they told me to come here. Anyway, they sat down, they had a conversation, smoked a cigarette, and then they said, wait a minute, you came here in a black van? You are. By the time they got him in to be processed, it was too late for the carrying out the immediate sentence. And basically that saved his life because pressure came from all over the world, especially from Latvia and United States, because they had some kind of trade issues, and they commuted his sentence to hard labor of 10 years, then 3 years, then they sent him out. Within 10 days he was gone, out of prison. This is in July of 1927. The problem is he could not continue to survive in Russia without having these people hound him, and so he left. When he left Russia, he moved to Latvia only because it was convenient. But it was too small for him. The population of Jews were too small. He needed to raise money for Russia. He needed to set up a court, a Hasidic court, and there should be facilities to be able to accept him. So he came to the United States in 1929 till 1930 for a year, tried to raise money. The depression was here. It was not quite successful. He saw the situation of Judaism in the United States, and he was quite unhappy about it. But he was still thinking. By 1939, he decided he was moving, except on September 1st, which happened to be Rosh Hashanah, we started the Blitzkrieg, and then that was a problem. It just about got him out, which is a whole different story in and of itself. When he was in 1930, he returned back to Riga, to Latvia, and in 1933 he moved to Warsaw, which was where the bastion of Hasidism was, and so on, and Judaism. But then he began to feel weak, and his speech began to slow. And he went to see doctors, and then he went to see specialists, and finally he went to Austria. And in 1933, in Austria, with his son-in-law to become the next Rebbe with him, there was a major expert or big specialist there who diagnosed him with MS. And that was as a result of the suffering that he had in the hands of the Jewish communists in Russia. They pushed him downstairs, and they mistreated him. And he was very, very strong until that point. And then they put him on a very strong regimen of diet. He was the first doctor, this guy, who came up with the idea of holistic medicine, where everything is connected to one another. It's all centralized. It's not in one place. And so he put him on a very strict diet. And he was doing quite well. He was a 5-month plan, so he had to stay there in Peckfurt-Dorst or something, somewhere in Austria. This guy ended up moving from Austria in 1935, when Nazism became very powerful, to Paris. And the previous Rebbe did come to visit him in Paris then, and then one of his very wealthy patients, who moved to England from Germany as a result of the Nazi rising to power, said, "You come here, I will buy for you." He bought for him a hotel and turned it into a clinic. And so he moved to England, and then the Rebbe said, I can't use that doctor anymore. So the Rebbe at this point was not healthy. He stuck to the diet, but he needed also to bathe in certain minerals and that type of thing to deal with the MS, and he couldn't. Besides the fact he was building Chabad around the world at that time, setting up the seeds, the places, setting up the places and so on around Chabad, around the world. And so for him he was very, very active in writing. They told him, the doctor said to him, stop talking and write, because he saw that writing relaxes him, and so on. So he was very active in his writing. But he wasn't going to write things for which he had to do major research. For that, he appointed the Rebbe, his son-in-law, to become the next Rebbe. So the Rebbe was really very active, although he was not around the Hasidic court at that time. He was in Paris and he was in Berlin studying electrical engineering. For that, he had to take algebra, and he had to take all the physics. He had to take all these subjects. And he was in a very select private school there, and he was studying this stuff. But he was only there for a couple of classes a day. And then, I'm just reading this book now, and then you find how many absences he had. He had 119 and a half absences in 1937 or something.
They kept him in school?
He had to work he had to deal with a special understanding. Because of Fridays, he had to leave early. In Paris, Shabbos can come in at 3:30, 4 o'clock. Sometimes he had to walk home from school on Friday because it was too late. And Saturday was a mandatory day to attend, and he couldn't attend. There were a lot of reasons why. But the bottom line is, he was also working for Chabad at that time. People didn't know this. People didn't know this until the last few years, when things became more, things in the Rebbe's home became more accessible after the Rebbe passed away. Until that point, nobody knew what he was doing in Berlin and Paris. He knew he was studying in the university because he wrote that to people. He met with academics and scientists and so on and so forth, and he kept up with the latest scientists as well, developments. He would spend approximately 10 minutes a day. One of his secretaries, Rabbi Krinsky, that may he be well, would peruse the newspapers every day. Take the New York Times, he would take the Washington, he would take all the newspapers he can find, and he would cut out just the articles that he thought that may interest the Rebbe. Anything that had to do with religion, anything that had to do with mathematics or engineering or that type of thing. He always cut those things. The Rebbe spent about 10 minutes keeping up with the news in that fashion. So that's how he kept up with things. There was no internet. He didn't receive papers and stuff like that, but he was up to date. So the previous Rebbe, by penning a letter, and a letter that was close to about a subject very close to his heart, was a very special. It must have been a very special type of connection between this person and the previous Rebbe. Also, probably wanted this to be published at some point in some kind of journals that would be coming out from Chabad about this idea. It was a very important idea. So this is the background, the history of this particular letter. Atvotsk. I'm sorry. So he moved from Warsaw to Atvotsk in 1936. So he should be surrounded by more gardens and resort type of living, suburban living, rather than the busy, very, very busy from a general standpoint and a Jewish standpoint, Warsaw, which had, it was industrious and it had all kinds of cars going on around there already, and buses and trams and trains, and it was a bustling city. And so he moved to Atvotsk, which was a little village outside of Warsaw, still there today. Greeting and blessing. In response to your letter, I enjoyed reading your recollections about my uncle, Rabbi Zalman Aaron. His soul is in Eden, in other words, he's passed away, and I would be interested in reading any stories you may have heard from him. The previous Rebbe was heavily into stories. When in 1915, the Chabad left Lubavitch, the little tiny village of Lubavitch. It is a tiny village. There is not a paved road in there till today. There's no running water in that village till today. But there is a setup there. If you ever went to Lubavitch, if you ever found yourself in Lubavitch today, there is a place that's called 770. It was bought by Chabad International. There is a big area there where there's a house, and you can go in there and sort of sleep over and everything else, and then can visit the grave sites of two of the Rebbes. The third and fourth Rebbe were buried there, and their wives, and so in the cemetery there. In Lubavitch. That Lubavitch is the name of a village, which still exists. There's no Jews that live there today. But so when they left in 1915, after 102 years of the court of Chabad being in Lubavitch, in the city of Lubavitch, the shtetl, Lubavitch is just a little shtetl with mud roads and nothing. So the shtetl life of Chabad Hasidism was ended. And the previous Rebbe sensed this. And he prolifically wrote. When he was for 5 months in Austria, he wrote to his daughter, eventually to become Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, a 200-page letter. 200 pages, which became a book in and of itself, all about the history of Lubavitch, when the Jews moved there. Where did he hear this from? From his grandparents, his great-grandmother, with whom he sat every single day for an hour or two and listened, and then would write down his own memoirs. He also listened to all kinds of Hasidim that were coming and going from the first Rebbe, from the Baal Shem Tov's time. And he just wrote, he has thousands of pages. And every time he spoke, he told more stories about times when he was younger, realizing that if you want to appreciate where Lubavitch came from, you're going to have to know all of this information. And he did this. And so he was basically asking all the Hasidim, whatever memories you have, even from 50 years ago, from anything, send it to me, please. Because he wanted to draw the history of Lubavitch. Thanks to him, we have that. There is a 3-volume book in English called the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Memoirs. And that's a separate book that he wrote, about the founding of Hasidism and the founding of Chabad Hasidism. Right? When you read this, he just transports you back. You can actually smell the goats running around that shtetl. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable.
What is it called?
The Lubavitcher Rebbe's Memoirs. It's a fascinating book. So that's why he's asking this guy, if you have any more stories, please pass them along. It interests me greatly. So contrast him to the Rebbe, to his son-in-law who took over. He told a story or two or three maybe in a 5 or 6 hour thing, but his thing wasn't stories. He would sometimes retell the stories that the previous Rebbe had told and explain them and deal with them and explain why the previous Rebbe said it in this particular date and what's the connection and so on. But he wasn't the storyteller, the master storyteller or story writer as the previous Rebbe was. And he needed to do this, so it was good for him to do it for his health as well. He was when he had this MS. He was born in 1880, so in 1936 he was in his 50s. He wasn't an old man, I think. All right. Okay. In response to your question, can one conceive the idea of the worlds as existing one above the other in a literal sense, in other words, spatially, in other words, with space, and say that there exists an infinite amount of worlds within physical space? Do you treat these worlds as just like the way we would treat any physical matter that has one on top of the other? There is a hierarchy. Something's on the top and something's on the bottom. As understood from Tanya chapter 2, section 2. Section 2, chapter 7. And let's see, footnote 1, page 82a. He's going to quote from the Tanya. The term world can be applied solely to that which possesses the dimensions of space and time. Space, referring to east, west, north, and south, upward and downward, and time to past, present, and future. All these dimensions have no relation to the holy supernal attributes. That means you can't use these dimensions when you talk about spirituality, when you talk about holiness. That's what it says in the Tanya. So it's a quote. As understood from Tanya, section 2, chapter 7, one should not conceive of the spiritual worlds as physical space. One should not conceive them as a physical. If so, in what way do they differ than the physical worlds? In other words, you're calling them worlds, yet you're not attributing any world-like characteristics to them. So what's the difference between them and a physical world? And how can one conceive of them in relation to the infinite light, blessed be He, the infinite light, the light extending from God, who fills and surrounds all worlds? That means, what is the difference between them? So what kind of relationship do they have with God that makes them up and makes them down, makes them higher, makes them lower, makes them first, makes them second? How does that work? That's the question. And the answer is the book. Answer. It is written in the Zohar. The Zohar, of course, is the core of the Kabbalah. It's the Bible of the Kabbalah. It is written in the Zohar. The Holy One, blessed be He, made the lower world similar to the upper world. In other words, this lower physical world is analogous to the upper spiritual world. The Zohar makes statements, cliches, if you will. It's like the Bible. The Torah can use a word or a line, and from that you can build mountains. That's how core works. When you have a core of something, the fundamental of something, the way it works is it gives you the foundation, and then from there you can build upon it. So the Zohar just makes this statement. The statement is that God creates the upper worlds similar to how it is in the lower worlds. That's a very, very poignant statement, because in the book of Job, I wrote about this a few weeks ago in the Good Shabbos email. The book of Job says, it was precisely 6 weeks ago, the book of Job says that from my flesh I can perceive God. That means when I look at myself, I can understand, I can get to an understanding of God. The Torah, in the first portion, when it records the creation of mankind, it says that man was created in the image of God. Not animals, not anything else, but mankind. Human beings were created in the image of God. And that can mean several things. It can mean that if you look at the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, there's a certain standard that we have that animals don't have. We can, and that is parallel to some Kabbalistic metaphor for God. We could also think about intelligence. Intelligence makes a person, a human being, to be creative. Without intelligence, there is no creating. Yes, a bird can create a nest, but it can't create a house instead of the nest. It'll never come to the realization that a nest is a little flimsy, floppy thing that's in a tree that can be blown out in a bad storm, and therefore they need to build mortar and whatever. A bird will never come and write a manual for its children, so it should know how to build a house. And a bird will never do stupid things also. They'll never jump off a cliff and say, now I want to see what it will feel like if I'm soaring through the wind. So they don't have intelligence to do smart things, and they don't have intelligence to do stupid things. So that only a human being can do that, which is either to create or not to create, the opposite of create. So that's also in the image of God, because God is the creator, the ultimate creator. But he says, Job says that from my flesh I can perceive God means that everything about us is in the image of God. From my flesh means from my flesh, from my body, the way we work, the way the body works. Not just the mind and not just the face, but everything. And indeed, this picture up here, which we have painted, can be put into the frame of a human body. Whereas the top is the intellect, these two can be considered the shoulders on the right. Mm-hmm. On the two, these two can be considered the legs. The middle can be considered the middle part of a person that produces, and the bottom is the mouth. The bottom is the expression to the outside. I mean, this is the next step to convey what you think. So it could be also put into the structure of a person, as the Zohar indeed does that. So when we look at ourselves, we can perceive God. Now he's saying, when you look at the world around you, you can perceive the supernal worlds. That's now something very, very poignant, very, very powerful. Because you look around the world, and you may be fascinated in how the ant builds its thing, or how the mouse does this, or how the owl catches that mouse, and the anteater catches the ants. It's very fascinating how everything is, again, holistic. The whole world works together. It's very good. But to be able to preserve the spirit, to be able to observe the spiritual world, whoa, that's pretty powerful. That's very powerful. So that's what he's saying over here. He's making the statement from the Zohar that the way God created this world mirrors the spiritual world. Whoa, interesting. The heavenly, okay.
I find it profound, the lower physical world analogous to the upper spiritual.
Right.
I'm trying to get my head around that.
So this world is a metaphor, is an example to what you can perceive in the upper world. It's metaphorically, whatever you see out here actually will give you an understanding of how the upper worlds also work. Which means that we are put into a situation where things are hidden from us. But if we look carefully and deeply, we'll be able to uncover and reveal some amazing things. Okay, the Heavenly Academy. Now we're going to look at footnote 5, which extends over to page 22. Right now it's on page 21. Mativta de Rakia, or the Academy of Heaven. What in the world is that? In heaven, there are various levels that are called academies. The upper one is called the Academy of the Holy One, blessed be He. Blessed is He. Mativta de Rakia is the lower academy. That means the Heavenly Academy, but it's the lower one, and is synonymous with Gan Eden. Now, we've all heard of Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. What is the Garden of Eden? Well, you know that when God created Adam and Eve, he put them into the Garden of Eden. We know that. So there's a place on this world that we can consider Garden of Eden. Hopefully one day Peachtree City will be in that category. But the bottom line is there's somewhere in this world which we don't know anymore, because after man was kicked out of that place, it's out. But we don't know where that is. And God writes in the first portion of the Torah that there's angels that surround that place. You can't get there, wherever and whatever that means. So there's a Garden of Eden here in this world, just like it is in the other world. You hear of that. What is the Garden of Eden? So Eden, the word Eden in Hebrew is Eden. It means very refined, very, very special. In Yiddish, you would say edel. I don't know if you ever heard that word, edel. Yes, edel means refined. This person is an edel person. Soft, sweet, no bad word, just edel, just refined, nice. I'm sorry?
In the Sound of Music, there's a song called Edelweiss.
It's with Anita.
Edel?
You flower. Yeah.
Yes, the flower.
Yeah,
Vice.
EDEL.
Vice.
And how do you spell the word?
Aleph, Yud, Yud, Daled, Lamed. I don't know how you spell it in English. Okay. Okay, so edel or refined is the same word as Eden, which means very, very, the highest form of pleasure, of softness, of sweetness, people, everyone knows people like that, who are just like simple, very, very soft, gentle, sweet souls. So that's what Eden means. And this would be the Garden of Eden. That is the highest level of that. Now, we can only imagine that as a garden, as a physical place. But when you talk about it in spiritual terms, there could only be one meaning to that, and that is the ability to comprehend something, to understand something, because there would be no need for any physical pleasure in a spiritual world. So as Maimonides says, in that state, there is no sitting and standing. There is no happiness and sadness. There is no, this way, that way, or eating or drinking, from which we may receive physical pleasure. It is all in the perception, in the conception of the spiritual higher levels. So when you study Torah, when one studies Torah, when our ancestors and our fathers and mothers and grandparents, Bubbies and Zanies, are sitting up in the Garden of Eden and studying Torah on the most highly spiritual levels, that causes them tremendous pleasure. Eden. The pleasures of comprehending, of understanding the higher levels of God. And there's infinite levels to that, so you never stop. Which Torah really is talking about a much more spiritual thing, except it uses our language so it can be accessible to us. We can understand that when you have a bull that gores another bull 3 times over, then that bull has to have this. So we take these laws and we take them literally. But the spiritual side of things makes it much more deeper, and there's not so much necessarily a bull and another bull, but there is something that is spiritually standing for that. And again, I'm not in Gan Eden. Thank God I'm down here in this world, so I can't give you the whole understanding of it. But when you learn a lot of Hasidic teachings, you learn a lot about these ideas of how, in the words of the Talmud, the Torah is talking in the vernacular of the lower level, but it's really alluding to the higher levels. So when a soul, after it's in its eternal repose in the Gan Eden, as we say, as one says in the Yizkar, then the soul at that point at the Gan Eden is able to perceive, and that's what we're asking God to do in the Yizkar. That's why Yizkar is so important. It's not just a prayer to remember. It's a prayer of asking God to look after. That's why it's extremely important, very highly valuable for the soul. as well as for us and our connection to those souls, that they should have an elevation as a result of our prayers. And as a result of we say, I'll give without vow, I'll give tzedakah on their behalf. That's what it is all about, that they should ascend to higher levels. So, the lower level of the heavenly academy is that Gan Eden, where they are studying, the academy that teaches Torah in the Garden of Eden. At times it is referred to as the academy of the angel Matat. Matat is Matatron, the highest angel in heaven, higher than anyone else, higher than Michael, Gabriel. Matatron is called. After the souls of the righteous depart from this world, they ascend to the Metifta de Rakia, where they study Torah, just as I just said. Just as in the days of the Talmudic sages, there were two academies, one in Naharda'ah, which is in Babylonia, and the other in Sura, also in Babylonia. Sura is a city that still exists. In heaven, too, there are two academies and two primary levels of Gan Eden, the upper and the lower. See the Talmud Sota and Rashi, see the Zohar, see also the Likutei Torah, which is from the first Rebbe of Chabad, and other references over here. So, and we will discuss this, by the way, in next Tuesday, not this one, but Tuesday from the week from Tuesday in our class about heaven and the other side of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So, here we are, it's the 17th, right?
Yes.
This coming Tuesday.
No.
No,
17th.
the week after.
That's right.
Last Tuesday.
This coming is the 10th.
Yeah, the week after, it's not this week.
Are we going to force you to stay in town? No. Oh, good. Well, it's good that we don't have to force you, but good that you're in town.
Does that not work? Yeah, no, it works.
Make sure to check the calendar.
And we weren't gonna be home on the
Right.
10th. And we were gonna be home for the 17th.
Okay, so back to the inside over here on page 20. Back to page, just the last line on page 20. The Heavenly Academy and its order of study, which the way the study works over there, the chambers of the righteous, the announcements of make way, the order of receptions for the souls of the righteous that arrive from this world, the ascent of Moses, our teacher, to heaven, the ascent of Rabbi Yishmael, the high priest, and his question. Okay, now we're going to stop here. We're going to read the footnotes. What time is it? We're going to read the footnotes of what in the world is going on over here. He's made statements which, if you would be versed in the Talmudic literature, you would know what these things mean. But one after the next, we're going to look at the footnotes and see what he's referring to. And I'm going to jump to the last two lines here, and then we will jump back inside. Just before we get to the footnotes, the last two lines on this page, right after number 14, all these attest to the fact that the order of things in the upper world is similar to that of this world. So all of these situations that he's going to bring up now are an indication from around the statements of our sages that there is an upper and a lower. There is a higher and definite hierarchy, or upper lower in heaven, as much as it works on this world as well. So let's see what he's referring to. Each one of these is a beautiful story in and of itself. First, let's talk about the chamber. Heichal, that is footnote number 6 on page 22. Heichal, chamber. In the introduction to Tikkunei Zohar is a section of the Zohar. Elijah, that's Elijah the prophet, is quoted. And he says as follows. And by the way, this is part of it's in the prayer book. It's in the liturgy that we recite on Friday afternoons before the afternoon service. It is a long statement from the Academy of Elijah the prophet. We hear about his miracles, but we don't hear about his Torah. Well, in the Zohar, it is quoted there from Elijah the prophet, and we say this every single Friday before we pray the afternoon services, which precede the Kabbalah Shabbat, the Ilchadodi, and the Friday night service. So this is what is said. You are he who has brought forth 10 garments, and we call them 10 sefirot. 10 garments means basically just like a garment. What is going on with this phone over there? 10 garments mean it's just like a garment of a human being. When we wear a garment, the garment covers up our essence, ourselves. It covers our bodies. But at the same time, it also reveals who we are. So a woman wears certain type of clothing and a man other type of clothing. A doctor may wear this long white kittel, and the garbage collector does not quite wear that. If he would, it would become quite dirty and it would be very impractical. A rabbi wears a certain type of clothing, and the storekeeper wears a different type of clothing. If you're working in a fish market, you're going to wear some thick clothing, and then you're going to wear some very dirty, smelly garments, because that's what's going to happen when you're working in the fish. And if you're working in the behind the counter, you're going to wear other garments. So each person wears garments that supposedly, hopefully, would express who they are. That's what a garment is. At the same time, though, the garment hides. The garment covers. That's the purpose of a garment. It's to cover you. And the colder it gets, the more garments you're going to wear, because, well, except for Susan and I, because we don't want to be exposed to the cold. So we bundle ourselves up, and we want to be comfortable, we want to be warm. So the garments cover us even more to maintain our own personal heat within ourselves. So a garment is expressive, yet it's hiding. Similarly, he uses the term garment to express how the energy of God is introduced to this world, because it reveals a little bit but hides even more. And eventually, because of that, we can interact with one another. Well, because we have garments, we can distinguish between one another. One of the things they did in Nazi Auschwitz, for example, when they came out of the initiation, when they went in, they put in a tattoo of numbers, and then they took them to be deloused, so to speak. They scrubbed them down with some kind of chemical. They gave them showers. Then they made them stand to drip dry. They didn't have any towels. They weren't going to give them towels. Sometimes they would open the door in the freezing cold and let them dry that way. And then eventually so their hair was shorn, their garments were removed, and they were given these flimsy blue and white outfits. Either for the women it was just one long tunic, and for men it was a tunic and a pair of pants. And you had some clogs, some wooden shoes that they made. That was it. You didn't get another one. And maybe a hat as well, also a blue and white hat. Once you do that, there's pictures of this. You see groups of women. You can't tell what they are. You can't tell the difference between them. No hair, no clothing, no nothing. Clothing distinguishes us from one another, so we can now interact with each other without interfering with the other, without getting into the other one. Now you know the differences, because we express ourselves in different ways. I wear a white shirt, you wear a green shirt, you wear a pink shirt, and you wear a blue shirt. It's just, the way you want to express yourself. So each person has that attribute, which the garments hopefully hopefully express who they individually may be. It's the same thing with the energy. It comes from God. It also comes couched. It comes as it is hidden within the energy that comes from God. It's like sort of a hidden situation. Yet it expresses itself just enough so that you can get a glimpse of what it is. We call it sefirot, but he says he called it garments. That's what Elijah teaches, okay? So you are he who has brought forth 10 garments, and we call them 10 sefirot, through which to direct hidden worlds which are not revealed, and revealed worlds. Mm-hmm. That you can express your hidden worlds, and of course to create the revealed worlds. The Hebrew term for worlds is almin, or in Hebrew, that's in Aramaic, or in Hebrew, olam. Olam va'ed, melech ha'olam. Ha'olam is the world, universe. Okay? So in Hebrew it's almin, from the word he'elem, which means concealment. The world the word for world says, I am a concealment. So the world is like a garment because it conceals, just like a garment does. In the Zohar, the worlds are called heichalot, or chambers. In other words, not quite like a world, but more like a chamber concept. There is the chamber of chesed, which is kindness, the chamber of gevura, which is severity and discipline, the chamber of zechut, zechut means merit, and so on, etc. Within these chambers, souls of the righteous bask in the radiance of the Shekhinah. Shekhinah is the divine presence. And angels stand in fear and love of God. Fear doesn't mean afraid, but fear means in awe. Hence, Hechalot HaTzadikim, the chamber of the righteous. That's what this chamber is referring to. It's referring to the world of kindness, or the world of discipline, and so on. And then you have certain souls that will come down to this world, and they will just be inclined to constantly be kind, and they can't help themselves. And then there are people who may be constantly in the very disciplined manner, and they will not be kind. They will tell you that the reason why they're not being kind is because I mean it for the best of the other one. So you can be a father who's a millionaire. I won't give my kids one penny. They need to find it on their own, just like I did. I call that evil. No. So what are you going to do with your money? You're going to blow it, or you're going to give it away? Who better to give it charity to than to your own children? It makes no sense, but that's how they are inclined. So, in the Talmud, the most common disagreements are between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. Shammai was a person who was very exact. In fact, he was a builder, and he always carried around with him that stick that you put down to make sure everything is balanced. The leveler, right? So he was called that. The fact that his name Shammai means to assess, to evaluate. That was him. That's your friend Larry. Then you have Hillel, who was just so giving and always soft and kind. That's Mel. Just
I've fallen the crack.
So, because Mel said this guy is so exact to the millimeter, to the little tiniest of inch. And sometimes you don't have to be there. So Beit Shammai always finds himself being more strict, and Beit Hillel finds himself being more lenient in Jewish law. And you find, other than about 15 or 18 matters, in hundreds of matters, Beit Hillel rules this way, and we follow Hillel. We always follow Hillel, besides for these very few, also obscure type of laws that you would never come in contact with these days anyway. Have to do with purity and impurity and stuff like that. Now, so Hasidic teachings ask, what is this, a game? You have two people deciding Jewish law based on their tendency, based on how they feel about things? Is this a feeling, or is this law? How do you base law on how you feel? It's law. And so the answer is, it wasn't that they felt this way because they woke up one day and they decided they're going to be kind and this. Their soul, their neshama, came from these different chambers. And so one person is born with a tendency that they have to just simply do good. These are the very edel, soft, gentle type of people, you hope. Sometimes they're not. They're just wild, violent, and they channel their violence and wildness into, we decided that this is what we need to do. It could be misdirected, being too kind or too unkind to other people. Like these communists, we want to be kind to the whole world. We want everyone to be equal. Oh, except when you're not equal to us. See, that's a way of life that is based on inequality instead of being equal. It's, you have to be equal to what I want you to be equal. That's not equal. Then so that's why communism never ever succeeded, and in fact, it succeeded in suppressing, hurting other people, enslaving other people. I don't know how democracy works, and that also people left between the cracks. And so I don't want to debate that issue, but communism for sure is evil. It's not. It sounds good on paper, but it's not good. It never has proven to be good. It always has proven to be corrupted in the end of the day. So these are the chambers of the souls, and that's why Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel had the tendencies from this. They ruled according to the spirituality of the thing. When they saw it from the spiritual source, they saw it in this way or that way. Heichal, which means the chamber, from the word hitkalalut, which means inclusiveness. That's where the Heichal comes from. Olam means to be hidden. The world means to be hidden. Heichal means to be included. That connotes that it contains all within it. Everything is included in it. For example, the Heichal of Chesed, of kindness, is general. In general, is Chesed. That means that is the dominant feeling in there. But more specifically, it contains Chochma of Chesed, which means the wisdom of Chesed, Chesed of Chesed, the kindness of kindness. How kind is your kindness? Is your kindness really kind, or is it because of ulterior motives? Are you being kind because you want that other person to recognize you or to acknowledge you? Is that your kindness coming from? So each chamber has the other 10, or the other 9, within it. So when you have this rule of 10 in a world, each one of them is made up of the other one. So when you have the kindness, there is the wisdom of kindness, the understanding of kindness, and the application of kindness, the kindness of kindness, the discipline of kindness, the compassion of kindness, and so on. So each chamber, because it's called Heichal, it means Hitkalalut. It's all inclusive. Chesed is the dominant focus, and within that focus, when you compartmentalize it, when you decide that how it works, so there is the intellect of it, there is the feeling of it, the emotion of it, there is the giving of it, and so on. Along with all the 10 sefirot, similar to a circle or house that contains many objects. So when the term Heichal is used in Kabbalah, it means that this is a chamber that contains everything. It's a home, it's a place, it's a location that has everything in it. All the objects are there. So when you hear that term, the chamber of the righteous, which is found in several places in the Zohar, as we said before, then you are dealing with a hierarchy. There is compartments over there. There is wisdom, and there is kindness, and there is discipline. There's different sides to it. So there is differences within that chamber itself. When you use the term chamber, it indicates that there is a difference. That's what he's saying. That even in the spiritual world, there can be differences between one and the other. Oh, wow, it's 11:07. My gosh. All right, so we'll study the next expressions, all the other expressions, in our forthcoming class, when we deal with all the other fascinating quotes that he has from different places around the statements of our sages to indicate that there is an up and a down, and these are all interesting stories of how things work and how things don't work. Thank you.